mean, inevitably, you do wind up like working on a campaign and you go, who the fuck is that? And you go, oh, that's the girlfriend. That's the first one I came across, but that was
That's
the
funny.
boyfriend. That was the boyfriend because,
Funny.
and what was funny about it, I mean, not funny about it, but the woman was quite accomplished. And her husband was gay. And I have no idea at what point in the
Right.
relationship, I mean, maybe he came out, maybe he didn't, maybe it was some kind of, who the fuck knows why, but they were married and they had a respectful, they had an agreement. And
Yeah. Yeah.
alley up. But the
Yeah.
boyfriend was this kind of like rough fucking macho dude with like, the sports car and the open shirt with the fucking gold chains and you kind of look like,
Oh, yeah.
and you're kind of like, no, he can't be in this room now. But it was kind of a
Uh-huh.
funny, I mean, he was a boy toy and, good for her. I mean, it's like, um, he was a boy toy, but
To go
you
back to what you said earlier, now that would have been the joke for Puerto Ricans. The pool boy, now that would be
the
a
pool boy,
meaningful conversation right there.
right?
If
There's,
she had hired her Puerto
yeah,
Rican pool boy.
yeah. I mean, everybody should Google in pool boy and Jerry Falwell Jr. And go down that fucking rabbit
Oh,
hole.
shit.
Remember that?
I will be doing that.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole,
You
man.
know, the funny thing is
Threesomes
when
with the pool boy. Threesomes with
oh
the
yeah,
pool
that's
boy.
right. No, and they picked up his wife and Junior. That's right. They
Junior.
picked up a bartender that like dated her for a couple of months, and he's
Yeah.
the one that spilled the beans on them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And again,
And then there was also a video of Falwell Jr. with his arms around some woman holding a drink, and yeah, I remember that whole thing. That's right.
it's
He ended up
great.
losing the getting kicked out of Liberty University board or something, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of funny too. You think Dad sets you up? It's Tommy Boy. Dad sets you up with an unscrewable gig.
Yeah,
All you have to
yeah,
do is show up and not do anything, and you got a gig for life. You got a six-figure gig for life,
totally,
and you fuck it up. I mean, Jesus
100%.
Christ. I mean,
If you're in that situation, wherever you go, get rid of cameras because the picture was really damning for him.
yeah,
And whoever you work with, take a page out of the book, sign an NDA. You're going to have a little something on the side for your wife and you want to watch, make that motherfucker sign an NDA. Why would you risk everything for that?
make them deportable. Are you a citizen? No. Okay. Here's the deal. If this comes out,
So no Puerto Ricans. You want a Cuban. You want a Cuban is what, is what you
yeah,
want.
no, you're a Puerto Rican American citizen. Nope, sorry.
All right, Chris, there it is. It's the last week before the election. The next time you and I talk here, we will be on the other side of Election Day. And you know what? We will probably know as much as we know now. Because nothing is going to be known, I don't think, for a while. I'm going to defer to you, Chris. What do you see? What should we expect in the next week?
So chaos. I think we should expect chaos, and I think we should
to be the bearer of good news, Chris. I'm sure everybody loves hearing that.
Well, here's what I will say, and I've had friends kind of text me that they'll see a tweet or they'll see a blog or they'll see a video, and they'll say, "Is this true?" And it's usually somebody spinning that Trump is ahead or Harris is ahead or it's over or this is a factor. Here's what I can tell you. I can tell you two true things. Done elections for 40 years. I work with people who've done them over 40 years. And the polls and the analytics are so close that we're not even sure what they mean because they could go either way. And what you look for are trends. And so, I've probably seen 6,000-7,000 polls in my life, maybe probably more. If you're a professional pollster that I work with, one of the people that I work with, you've probably seen a couple 100,000. And they're looking at this shit and they're going, I'm not sure what it means. I think it means this. It could mean that. For some fucking jerk off on Twitter or on their, show to say this is what it means and this is what's happening is absolutely like, so don't believe any of that because it's just going to drive you crazy. Here is what is interesting, though, and what we know from early returns. So the early returns In swing states, not overall, but swing states, in Pennsylvania, Nevada, and North Carolina, they look more Republican than they traditionally do. Instead of, if you're a Democrat losing your mind, you have to remember is that in 2020 and in 22, Trump actively tried to debase early voting and mail-by voting. So he literally suppressing his own vote, or the Republican vote, and so that number would be less. So what it looks like is that Republican voting numbers in early voting have reverted back to the mean. So it means nothing. So it means 2016. So it means a close election. 2020 means a close election. Or 2016 means a close election. So the second piece of that, though, which I think is important and is germane, is that, and I'll take Pennsylvania since I kind of know it pretty well, that Republican registrations have changed over the past 4 years. And what in 2018 and 2020 was an overwhelmingly Democratic advantage has now been eroded, and it is a slight Republican advantage. And smart people who are bipartisan that I talk to say Pennsylvania is Republican +1. And what does that mean? Well, it means that based upon all voters who are likely to come out, there is 1% more Republican than Democrat, basically. So, and in 2020, I think it was 3% more Democrat than Republican. So that doesn't mean that's how people are going to vote, because you have hundreds of thousands of Republicans in southeastern, in the Philadelphia media market, who are not going to vote for Trump. So it doesn't mean that. However, it means that in Pennsylvania, the political environment is more favorable for Republicans generally. That's all it means. What happens is that when you get to a state, yeah, sure, go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, is there, on the data that you have access to, I mean, I look at the, I've been using the University of Florida election lab for early voting breakouts. But based on what you just said, my assumption would be if you registered as a Republican since 2020, you're voting for Trump right now. Like, that's just the way it's going to be. But if you were a registered Republican before 2020 and you live in Philadelphia, I get it. You're probably not going to vote for Trump. But if you were motivated to register as a Republican in the last 4 years, and specifically since, let's say, the primary started, so the last 2 years maybe, I think you're going to vote for Trump. So is there a way of knowing who's...
No, not really.
I think so, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If since 2020, if you register Republican, you are going to vote Republican, and you're going to vote, and you're more than likely you're going to vote for Trump. You know, that's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah. I don't think Nikki Haley motivated anybody to like register Republican. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But yeah, but I don't think, but again, that's all that means. And you have to look at these numbers on a state level. If you look at them on a national level, it doesn't mean anything. Here's something else that's really interesting, because I can hear like our Harris voters opening windows to jump out as I'm saying this. Here's the other piece, that with Trump being tied, maybe one up, maybe one down, Trump has gained incredibly well among African Americans. He's almost at 20%. He got 12% in 20. African American males. He's almost at 20% now. He's not quite at half Latino males, but it's a huge number. It's a huge jump. And Harris, by the way, is doing that well among Black female and Latino female. So, but it should be an advantage for Trump, and it should be an advantage for Trump nationally. The problem is where those votes are distributed. So if you look at where there are big swaths of Latino voters, Florida, which is not a competitive state, Texas, which is not a competitive state, California, which is not a competitive state, Georgia, which is not Georgia maybe is in play, maybe, but so you've got New York, which is not a competitive state. So if you look at the big population centers where there are Latinos, the distribution doesn't help Trump win Pennsylvania or North Carolina or Georgia. Now, there are Latino voters in Pennsylvania. I think there's like 100 and almost 200,000. 200,000 Latinos. I'm not sure how many are voters. But yeah, so does that matter on the margins? Of course it does, especially in a state where the winner's probably going to win by 25,000 votes or less. So all that little shit matters. But it's such a minutia level that I have no idea what it's going to mean. I know people that are working on the Bob Casey campaigns, Senator of Pennsylvania, and the Dave McCormick Pennsylvania campaign. They don't fucking know what's going to happen. And they've been grinding on this shit for almost 2 years. And so, and so when you hear some junior college professor go on and say, this is what it means, no, it doesn't. So you've got a really close vote. What's interesting about it, but
that's what I do at every cocktail party, Chris, is I wax prophetic about what's going to happen.
And again, and so do I. I mean, I did another podcast, and it was like I'm waxing prophetic, and I was full of shit. It wasn't full of shit. It was.
I think everybody here, Chris, is feeling a little bit jaded. Are you cheating on us podcast wise? Are you?
Yeah, I'm cheating. I got asked by a friend. I got asked by a friend in my hometown. And actually, it was kind of an interesting discussion, which I can kind of compress, and maybe it'll interesting. But so, and
also plug the podcast. Give your friend a shout out if you want. What the podcast is if you want.
If I can remember the name. But it doesn't mean that anything I'm saying is not true or isn't going to happen. But it's just that we don't know. And again, and the margins are so small. Like, the Puerto Rican garbage thing out of the Trump rally. There have been a bunch of...
For sure.
There have been a bunch of things. That's going to swing Pennsylvania because there are 75,000 Puerto Ricans in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. And that's going to... Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Potentially, that's absolutely true. But how do you measure that? Unless you've been measuring those specific Latinos in that area for a couple surveys, and now you're taking a series of post surveys of that, you can say, yes, there's movement. If you can't do that, shut the fuck up. I mean, and it's kind of like,
question, though.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. Is that statement, though, and anybody who watched the America First rally 2024, anybody who watched that and saw this guy who I've never really thought Tony Hinchcliffe is a funny comedian. No offense to him. He does kill Tony here in Austin. I don't think he's funny. But I've done stand-up comedy. I give a lot of leeway. Neither here nor there. Anybody who watched it, I don't know that it would only affect the demographic he was speaking about. Don't you think that there is a certain soccer mom, suburban soccer mom, who all she knows maybe is what's breaking news, maybe on CNN, maybe on Fox, probably not on Fox. She didn't see it as much, and then suddenly you see this and you're like, who the fuck are these people that like just think something like that would, like, that's just not funny. And it's a turnoff to so many people. And if you are undecided right now, you are just kind of by definition somewhat flaky. You couldn't have a clearer difference between two people, I don't think. So if you are undecided, don't you think that will affect maybe like a suburban soccer mom as well?
Yeah, I think it goes, yes. And I also think it goes beyond that. I thought Trump had a pretty good week prior to that.
Yeah. He was great people loved him on Rogan. I thought that was a good move.
I heard clips of it. I'm not listening to 2.5 hours of anybody at this point.
Yeah.
But he had a very good week. And Harris was kind of bunkered down like, Ava Braun and at the end of the war in DC, and it wasn't great. In 1998, I was working for Al D'Amato, who was a U.S. Senator from New York. And we were running against Chuck Schumer, who's the current Senate Majority Leader. We had that race pretty much won. It was going to be pretty close, but we had that pretty much won. But Al D'Amato, the joke is that you could never find Al D'Amato in the Al D'Amato campaign, because Al D'Amato was a liability, because Al D'Amato was, I don't want to say Trump before Trump, because it wasn't that like that, but he would tell off-color jokes. He would say stupid shit. He would just, and we always kind of hid him. Somebody on the campaign scheduled him for a AM radio, like a 6 a.m. radio talk show thing, and which he flew overnight to get to. He took the red eye in. So he's flying in a plane. He's a fundraiser in LA, and he flies all night, and he comes into this fucking thing, and with a couple of shock jocks, so I can't even remember who they were, and is doing like Chinese Judge Ito imitations, and called Congressman Jerry Nadler and Schumer. He referred to them as Putz Head and the Waddler. Jerry Nadler's very fat. So it's like, it was, it was kind of funny. But what it did is it kind of exploded. And it reminded people, right, that's why I hate Al D'Amato. And so it took all the good we've been doing for months, and it was like, right, I fucking hate this guy. And we lost a really close race. Yeah. And so it has the potential to be that kind of event, which, is counterweighed by, I thought Harris did an economic speech last night, which I thought was very good.
Mm-hmm.
She actually, I mean, where this has been for 3 months, I don't know, but she actually sounded like a normal human being. And whoever wrote it, that speech, forget whoever wrote that speech, whoever was able to get that speech in that version on the teleprompter, make them Secretary of State, because they can manage, they can manage deadly situations, difficult situations.
Yeah.
But then right on top of that, Biden kind of pops out and, calls Trump supporters garbage. And then the kind of really horrific, dispiriting spectacle of like otherwise supposedly like, legitimate newspaper people and media people saying, well, it was really an apostrophe and it wasn't. And it was like, shut the fuck up. If you heard it, you know what he said. I mean, it wasn't even particularly close. Right. And, it was 2 sentences, and, in the White House releasing statements with like the apostrophe in different places, it was like, shut the fuck up. But it goes to the Perry thing that we referenced a bunch of times. It's okay to step on your dick. It's not okay to jump up and down on it. And again, I thought Harris had the right response. Like, as well, it's the president. He's, but I don't feel like that because we're all Americans. I mean, it was the right, what are you going to say?
Smart.
His fucking brain's fried and we should keep him locked in the fucking closet. I mean, by the way, if she said that,
she was going to say, if you think that's bad, you should see him.
You should see the shit that it's like the fact that we're not in a nuclear war is amazing. I mean, actually, if she said that, she would probably win in a landslide because people go, oh my God, thank God. But yeah, but she kind of, she took the steam out of that, or he took the steam out of that.
Yeah.
A little bit, and the way the press has been playing it, when I looked at the New York Times and the Washington Post front pages, they were still doing Trump Puerto Rican garbage, and they kind of buried the Biden story. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have legs underneath, because, conservative social media is pushing that out like crazy, and it's going to resonate. And again, it's a stupid fucking thing to say. And, Biden has a history of saying stupid things, but this is like, this is almost like a deep state sabotage thing, like how can we step on her best day in 3 weeks?
That's true. Did you watch? So I know what you said about Rogan, and the America First rally was quite a long event as well. Did you watch much of that?
No, I didn't watch any of it. I mean, I've seen excerpts on social media.
Just like clips.
I heard the Rogan thing. I heard the Rogan thing, the piece, maybe about 20 minutes of it. And then I listened to the back and forth with Rogan, really trapping Trump on voter fraud. I thought he did a really good job without being antagonistic. I thought, like, if you were a normal person listening, you kind of go, gotcha.
Yeah, and funny enough, you're talking about Pennsylvania being close and everything. If you look at the reporting, the election lab, the University of Florida election lab, as of yesterday, about twice as many Democrats have voted early as Republicans, like registered. I don't know how they voted, obviously, but that includes early in person and mail in. So I don't know what the breakdown is there. What do you foresee? What do you know what the normal turnout is on election day percentage wise? I would assume it favors Republicans because that's kind of the mean traditional, the way it usually breaks. But is there that much difference that he can make up the 400,000 vote deficit he already has, according to this? Let's just assume Republicans vote Republicans, Democrats vote Democrats.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have the math in front of me, but in 2020, I want to say it was exponentially worse than that.
Interesting. Okay.
And he almost made it up in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
You know,
So, yeah. So, I guess
I don't know what it means.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, exactly. Did you see, by the way, Kamala was on, was it the Shannon Sharp show? She was on, have you seen any of that?
No.
So saw something that I became super curious about. So let's assume Kamala wins the blue wall states, but it looks to me like she might actually lose Nevada, interestingly enough, although they've rented out the Sphere in Vegas, which I don't know if you've seen the images or any of the video. It's like, I wonder how much that cost them. Like, it's just so much money.
Yeah, and that's kind of a bad sign. I mean, the fact that you're spending shit on that. And
It's
honestly, nobody wants
crazy.
to see, if you're living in your daily life, the last thing you want to see is a fucking political ad, fucking 10 stories high. You'd be like, oh, fuck you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and the funny thing is, I think there's so many things you could do that don't have to be so self-serving. Like, if you do that, make it something that's unique to the people's lives there and lean into that and just make it about the people, not about you, I think could be an interesting way of doing something like that. But to me, doing that is a little bit like hiring the banner behind the Cessna over the beach. You know, it's like, nobody really cares what you're flying up there. Leave us alone. But Nevada isn't actually looking good for her. In Nevada, Republicans are actually voting earlier in bigger numbers. They have a bigger percentage. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think it's almost like the same margin. It's like 50% more, just like in Pennsylvania. I don't know how it breaks down. Yeah, so actually, Republican right now is 5% more than Democrats. So they have about a 50,000 vote lead in Nevada, which I think would be an interesting move. So the reason I say this is the preface. Have you been tracking the Senate race between the independent Ben something in Nebraska and the incumbent?
Deb Fischer.
Right? Deb something for sure. You're right.
Deb Fischer,
I'm sure. And his name is Dan Osborne. I mean, he's within polling error of her, the thing I saw recently. So one of the things they were saying, talking about this Senate race, was Kamala wins the blue wall and loses the Sun Belt. It will be potentially the Nebraska 1st district or 2nd district outside of Omaha there that will determine who wins, and Kamala's leading there by like 10% or something. Forget that. This guy, Dan Osborne, he's an independent, so nobody knows how he's going to caucus. I assume he's probably going to caucus with the Republicans. But that does change.
He's a Democrat.
Do you think he's going to caucus as a Democrat, though?
He's a labor leader, kind of. He's a labor guy.
He is.
You know, I mean.
Okay.
By the way, what he should say?
I think he will vote Democrat, but I don't think he will caucus with them. But maybe
what he should say, if it is a split house, he should say, well, I'm an independent, but I'll caucus. If you caucus with one party or the other, it means you get control of the Senate. So if he's the Senate control, like, I would say, well, what's in it for me? What deal do you have? And
I think we know who the next leader of this. We know who the.
And you know, and you pop him, you make him chair of the Agriculture Committee, which would be important in Kansas. And then, like you say, I want, you know, basically, you know, Kansas is going to have more fucking infrastructure delivered to it the next 6 years, because that's the deal. And again, I mean, it sounds like a horrible, corrupt thing, but that's what you do as a U.S. senator. You deliver pork for your state, you know, and if you're a committee
100%.
chair, you know, you do that. So two things which are interesting. I think he falls short just because Kansas is so structurally Republican, but nobody's commented on.
He's in Nebraska, though, and Nebraska's a bit of it is a Republican, but it is kind of one of those weird places like Iowa. There's a little bit of a liberal tilt there.
Yeah, and they have a bicameral, they have a nonpartisan legislature. But again, I think the state. But nobody's pointing out that Osborne is the name of the most famous fucking person from Kansas, not named Bob Dole.
Tom Osborne, the coach.
Yeah. And you kind of go
yeah.
You know, I mean, I would, you know, I don't know anything about his campaign, but I'd be running that fucking parallel. But yeah, Tom Osborne is who was a member of Congress. Was he? I don't know if he was a senator or not. I know he was a congressman. but
I don't
a
remember.
beloved figure who delivered Nebraska national championships.
Yeah. Maybe two of them, by the way. Yeah, I think I would almost do ads like, I love my dad, but I've always wondered, is this my real father?
Yeah, right. No, that would be, I would be, but anyway, so it'll be interesting to see. But I mean, and I think it will be good to have a independent senator. And
Yeah.
I think it's good
Yeah.
to have independent. I think it's good to blow up the system every so often. You know.
Sure. I think also, I mean, has there ever been someone that was an independent senator and said, I will caucus with whichever party? It would have to break out the same way. But if he wins and Tester loses, you have a 50-50 Senate, and then it goes to whoever wins the White House. This is assuming that Allred doesn't defeat Cruz, which it doesn't look like he's going to do. Wins Osborne and says, I will caucus with whichever party wins the White House to give a clear majority. Then has anyone ever done that and just said, like, I'm independent, but I think if the people deliver a president of this party, I think I will also deliver the Senate to that?
I might be wrong. I believe Jim.
I think you're right. He did. I think. Yeah.
Daschle goes on to lose in his own state, and
Yeah.
McConnell reigns for the next 30 years. But yeah, but I think Jeffords did that. But I forget
That's a
when he
good
did
point.
it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I forget
Okay,
when he did that.
interesting. I just briefly want to ask you. I saw that there was an 18-year-old recently arrested in Florida for waving a machete outside of a polling place. There's this 35-year-old guy that has been arrested in Arizona for burning ballots.
The homeless guy.
And then we all know, I'm sorry?
He's homeless.
He certainly looks like about 60, and they say he's 35, so
Yeah,
I
no,
wouldn't
he's
surprise
a
me.
homeless.
And he does look rough. I mean, he's got
He's
some
a homeless
issues,
crazy
right?
guy. Yeah.
But he's not. Have they caught the person from Seattle and Portland?
No.
I heard that they have the car on tape, right?
Yeah, they have a car on tape. What we do know is that there was an incendiary device within the box, and it was all about Free Gaza. And traditional and the Antifa faction up there. Or I'm going to call them Antifa. I'm not, but the anarchist faction up there have done these kinds of things before. And literally they put out a video and flyer saying disrupt the election, fuck presidents, turn it all down, kind of thing. Which is so. I have some liberal friends saying, "Oh, it's a secret MAGA plot." It's a Smollett land. And so my
that is
guess
by far your best reference in the entire 48 episodes of this, to reference the way Dave Chappelle said Juicy Smollett.
Right? That's the fucking greatest thing. I mean, I remember hearing that, and I missed like half that special because I was just laughing at that. And by the way, it was a great piece of comedy that he did that the way he did that. He spun that, the Juicy.
Yeah.
But that's why he gets.
Yeah.
That's why he's $100 million guy.
Yeah.
No,
and on his terms, which is even bigger.
Yeah, I mean, imagine walking away from that show.
Yeah.
And the reason he did it was fucking admirable. But it's like, and it's like, I remember when he did it, it's like, I was like, oh, he's crazy or has a drug problem or something. Like, no,
that's exactly what I said.
He was the sanest guy in show business,
Yeah.
But there's also a case that's in the Philadelphia Inquirer yesterday. There is a trans activist named Charlotte Clymer, who apparently has been contacting Republican households to basically say you can't vote or the vote is already over. It's this murky kind of half-assed thing. But if you go into the Philadelphia Inquirer, so there's that kind of stuff. So I won't say a friend, an acquaintance of mine who actually went to prison for voter suppression. And it was kind of this half-assed thing. And, whether it was suppression or not, basically he was jamming a phone jamming a phone bank that was arranging rides to the polls, and which is kind of stupid, not really important, stupid. However, it was being run out of a fucking fire department. So he was jamming fire department phones, and you're like, are you fucking nuts?
Shit.
Are you fucking nuts? But anyway, he went to prison for like 2 years.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, I will be 100% honest with you. I had a conversation about this, and I don't care what party you're from. Attacking ballots to me is treasonous. It's such an integral part of a democracy. And I give leeway to an 18-year-old who is just young and a fucking idiot. And I give leeway to a person who lives on the street and probably is just not entirely coherent. But if there is an organized effort by or not even organized, if there's just an effort by a logical operating person, I can't think of a punishment that would be too outside of the realm of me being able to stomach it, because I do see it as just such an attack. I don't care who people vote for, it's their right. And to take that away from people or to attack that, I have zero sympathy for it. To that point, interestingly enough, there are two things there that you brought up that I wanted to mention. Trump tweeted on Twitter, there's widespread cheating in Pennsylvania. We need to report all of this. They're doing everything. Probably a Democrat or maybe some like never Trumper, but they retweeted it and it said, "Tell me your internals are telling you you're losing without telling me you're losing." I don't think that's true. I just think that's Trump's personality. I think that it's part of what I think the argument is against him.
There is a case in Lancaster County, which is, if you're not familiar with Pennsylvania, think Pennsylvania Dutch, think Amish. It is a fairly conservative county. And there were 26, they've identified 2,600 ballots that were voter registrations that were fraudulent. Not votes, registrations. And the way the system works, and again, and why to steal votes, to suppress votes, it is really fucking hard. And it's just about impossible. But so these were voter registrations, which all came in with like on the same day with the same signature that kind of looked like, and if you're an election board, you look at this and this is your job. You look at this shit all day. And so you can spot bullshit a mile away. So that's how the system is supposed to work. There is no, like the DA investigated and there's been no sign. And frankly, to say it was some kind of MAGA horseshit operation is believable, or to say it was some liberal faction trying to do something in a place where there are not a lot of Democratic votes is also believable. But like whoever it is, fuck them, put them in jail for a long time. I mean,
totally.
I'm with you on that.
And I think fraudulent registration, that's an intentional case. But again, that story increases my level of confidence in the system because they caught it and because they said they immediately blocked it. Right. So it kind of goes back to the Trump tweet, which is like, I don't think widespread cheating is actually possible. I actually agree with you on that. This is another issue. What are your thoughts on the effect? Now they're actually appealing it to the Supreme Court, but Virginia purging its rolls of, I think it was 1,600 votes. The Democrats sued. They won based on the agreement not to purge rolls within 90 days of an election, a federal statute. Do you think this Supreme Court takes that case? And if they do you think 6-3, they uphold Virginia purging the rolls?
They should. I mean, because here's basically, there are two things. Nobody is arguing that those voters are eligible to vote. Nobody. They are by statute illegal. They cannot vote. So that's one. So everybody agrees with that. But, what has happened is that you keep filing court cases and court cases and court cases and court cases, and it pushes the vote into that 90-day period, and you say, "Oh, you can't break the law because you've been filing continuances." So, it's a political machination, but like stealing somebody's votes or burning ballots, the idea that you are pushing legally to allow people that nobody thinks should vote, or most people think should vote, that the state law says you shouldn't vote, to vote is another fuck you. I mean, it's really kind of despicable. I mean, again, the argument is not whether these people should vote or not. State law says they can't. If you want to make an argument in the legislature that they can, you pass a different thing. But then to push laws down the road and push cases down the road so they come in conflict with the 90-day rule is kind of a despicable thing. Because ultimately they're arguing for, I want to allow potentially illegal votes. When what we should be talking about is how do we get, like, the state of Georgia. By the way, Kamala was doing her worst in Jim Crow bit earlier this week with the state of Georgia, which has a record number of early voters, 3 million. And, if you look at the state of Georgia, I think they've got 98% of the state is registered to vote. And they've got way higher turnout than, I think it's the second highest turnout in the country or the third highest. So, but that was a state that took a lot of shit, but they kind of modernized their voter rolls and they made it easier to vote and harder to cheat. And, and that's a good thing. And that's what you should be doing. It should be easier to vote and harder to cheat. And what's really funny is that most of the southern states are doing that. And electoral backwaters like California, where it takes months to count the votes, or Delaware or New York, despicable stuff.
It's interesting that, yeah, certainly I would imagine, and I'm glad you added a little color to it, because I wasn't aware that there had been legal challenges that pushed it into the 90 days. Because if the state just decided to do this in the last 90 days, I would say, listen, you had years to do this. Why are you doing this now? In which case I would lean on the side of the challengers to it and say, yeah, you had, the law is 90 days. But yeah, I mean, it seems like that was a strategic choice to push it into 90 days and then use that as your thing, which seems like a kind of a slam dunk ruling there. There's this story out in Nebraska. The Supreme Court there has ruled that the state can accept ballots, unpostmarked ballots received after the election day. That's kind of like a high-level clickbait title of an article. But as you just has somebody that's worked in campaigns and knowing the way campaigns since at least 2016 and for the foreseeable future are so undecided for long periods of time, is there a way to create a uniformity within our system that leaves it up to the states? Is there a way to just say, like, we're going to continue to have accusations of cheating if we don't say what is a uniform standard? And if we leave it to be too political, which means, the legislature can decide. Well, no, I don't mean this offensively, but there are a lot of legislatures around the country that might actually have reasons to want to influence it in a way that is a form of cheating, regardless of whether it's structural cheating or not, right? So what's your take on that? Is there an answer to that, or are we just stuck with this system?
I think it's stuck because there are too many, because you're not only affecting states, you're affecting municipalities. I believe it's Minnesota, it could be Illinois, but you can vote in some municipal elections if you're not a citizen, as long as there's some kind of, as long as you're living there or domiciled there, I think is what they call it. And so does that come in conflict with the federal law? And I think that, certain states have certain rules for good reasons. I think that it would be good if there was a uniformed thing with, part of the problem, for instance, if you're state of Georgia and you've got early voting, and the state of Georgia cut back early voting from COVID till now, and it was Jim Crow. No, the problem is that voting places are voting precincts. When you have to vote, they actually have to be fucking manned by people. And if you're a small rural county, that is a considerable expense. And if you volunteer, you're going to asking people to volunteer for 7 days a week. In Kentucky, for instance, what they did is they did something very smart, is that they looked at 2 elections where they had really long periods of time, and they realized that a minimal amount of people were voting then. And it costs people, taxpayers, a lot of money, and it costs volunteers a whole amount of time. And they said, you know what? The times we can't actually operate those polls for financial and volunteer reasons. We're not enough people to do it. We're just going to compress that down. And you didn't see any change. And again, I mean, if you have almost 2 weeks and mail and drop boxes to vote, and, you don't need a whole lot of, I mean, I think probably anything that's postmarked by election day, I think it's anything that should probably be allowed,
Yeah.
you know, and I think because you vote on election day anyway, you vote in person on election day. So it seems fairly reasonable, that you would allow anything postmarked by election day to be allowed. That strikes me as a fairly reasonable acceptance.
I mean, I agree. It's kind of the same way I feel about people who don't know who they're voting for right now. It's like, come on, man. In our country, people are running for president for 2 years. If you can't get your vote in within a month of voting and you don't know who you're going to vote for a week before it, it's like, I don't know. I don't know that I would hire you for any job. Are you incapable of making a decision at this point?
Right.
Let me ask you a couple of house things, because I
Sure.
know that's kind of probably where you're looking right now. What's your take on D'Esposito and Laura Gillen in Long Island? He's got, I guess he hired his mistress and her daughter, I think in his field office out in his district office. But he's a Republican. I think Democrats need to take 4 seats. That could be one of them. How's it looking for him?
I think that's a good chance of a pickup, but it's still a real tough case. She's not a great candidate, and I think that a politician having an affair is not exactly news in you.
But what about hiring that mistress and her daughter on the government payroll?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's absolutely bad, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. I would say it's not unusual. It's wrong, yes. It's wrong, yes. It's like, but at the same time, it's not shocking news. A politician hired his mistress and family members to work.
Yeah.
Here's where I will say the difference will be. If this is just some woman he's stupping and her kid from another marriage, and they're showing up to work and they're doing a good job, I'm not going to get real exercised about that. If it's a ghost job or it's being paid substantially more than that position would be,
Right.
I think it becomes something different. Again, it's New York. If this was Kansas, I think you'd have a different argument.
Right. We talked before about that congresswoman from California that cheated on her husband with like her chief of staff or something.
Yeah.
We talked about her months ago, and we kind of said that there was a huge difference between her cheating on her husband and her cheating on her husband with this chief of staff. I think there are probably some other details, but kind of does, in my opinion, don't you think, take away the argument of like drain the swamp when we're hiring our mistresses and our mistresses' daughters? I think it's a little swampy to hire your wife or your own kid. Like that's a little, Americans don't generally like nepotism. So it's interesting. I would think that the voters there would be like, yeah, this other person is not really our brand of politician, but we could deal with her for, 4 years and bring somebody else in next term. You know what I mean? I don't know though.
So one of the things you work on campaign, and it's like you make the mistake when you're young and you don't make it as you get older, is that who are the friends of the candidate? Inevitably, you wind up working on a campaign.
He is quite connected, I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, inevitably, you do wind up like working on a campaign and you go, who the fuck is that? And you go, oh, that's the girlfriend. That's the first one I came across, but that was the boyfriend. That was the boyfriend because,
Funny.
And what was funny about it, I mean, not funny about it, but the woman was quite accomplished and her husband was gay. And I have no idea at what point in the relationship, I mean, maybe he came out, maybe he didn't, maybe it was some kind of, who the fuck knows why, but they were married and they had they had an agreement. And
Yeah.
But the boyfriend was this kind of like rough fucking macho dude with like, the sports car and the open shirt with the fucking gold chains and you kind of look like,
yeah.
And you're kind of like, no, he can't be in this room now. But it was kind of a funny, I mean, he was a boy toy. and good for her. I mean, it's like he was a boy toy. But
To
but
go
you always
back to what you said earlier, now that would have been the joke for Puerto Ricans. The pool boy, now that would be
the
a
pool boy,
meaningful conversation right there.
right?
If
There's
she had hired her Puerto
yeah,
Rican pool boy.
yeah. I mean, everybody should Google in pool boy and Jerry Falwell Jr. And go down that fucking rabbit hole. Remember that?
I will be doing that.
Oh, it's a rabbit hole,
You
man.
know that the funny thing is
Threesomes
when
with the pool boy. Threesomes with
oh,
the
yeah,
pool
that's
boy.
right. No, with his and they picked up his wife and Junior. That's right. They
Junior.
picked up a bartender that like dated her for a couple of months, and he's
Yeah,
the one that spilled the beans on them, right?
yeah, yeah. And again,
And then there was also a video of Falwell Jr. with his arms around some woman holding a drink, and yeah, I remember that whole thing. That's
it's
right. He ended up losing the getting kicked out of Liberty University board or something, right?
yeah, and that was kind of funny too. You think Dad sets you up? It's Tommy Boy. Dad sets you up with an unscrewable gig.
Yeah,
Like all you have to
yeah,
do is show up and not do anything, and you got a gig for life. You got a six-figure gig for life,
totally,
and you fuck it up. I mean, Jesus
100%.
Christ.
If you're in that situation, wherever you go, get rid of cameras because the picture was really damning for him. And whoever you work with, take a page out of the book, sign an NDA. You're going to have a little something on the side for your wife and you want to watch, make that motherfucker sign an NDA. Why would you risk everything for that?
Or make them deportable. Are you a citizen? No. Okay. Here's the deal. If this comes out,
So no Puerto Ricans. You want a Cuban. You want a Cuban is what, is what you
yeah,
want.
no, you're a Puerto Rican American citizen. No, sorry. We need
Yeah,
somebody like we need
yeah,
a green card and a visa. Like you can ship the wife
right.
and watch, but needs somebody blackmailable to do
The
that.
only thing I can think about in this situation is the role that Hank Azaria played in the birdcage. Every time we talk about like a pool boy, all I can picture is Hank Azaria as this guy.
Yeah, I mean that.
Another another congressional race I'm curious about for you. I think it's probably relatively safe, but Tom Keene in New Jersey, right?
Yeah, he should be okay.
I think he's going to be fine probably, but it is interesting that, I wonder if some of this is like indicative of where things are as a whole of like where there's softness in the parties. Do you know what I mean?
New Jersey's kind
Where
of a
certain
bad.
seats are going to be realigning.
New Jersey's kind of a bad example for it because of the way basically because of gerrymandering.
Yeah.
You've had two close elections or a close like a 1-point gubernatorial election, yet somehow, 80% of the congressional districts are Democratic. And what New Jersey did under Republican Governor Christie Todd Whitman is she said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to have an independent group that's going to decide how votes head up. And we're going to end politics and gerrymandering because this is despicable. And we're going to take three Republicans and three Democrats. And the final member is going to be elected. He's going to be independent and elected. There he goes. Okay. They pass it. Who elects this third person is the state legislature. And so the legislature hires the biggest hack they can find who votes. And so New Jersey's had this series of 4-3 votes going back for fucking 30 years. And so what would be normal configurations and normal elections that would go back and forth, because New Jersey used to have a bunch of swing districts. And now they basically have cut this thing up. So there are almost no swing districts. And it's kind of like, so when everybody says, we need an independent commission, no, you fucking don't. Like, that's the last thing you need, because now this thing is unfixable. I mean, if it's a legislative thing, you can fix it. This thing is unfixable. And the last guy they got, which was hysterical, was some old judge or a college, I think he was an old judge, who didn't know how to use a computer, didn't understand elections. Basically, when the first map came out, they said something like, well, why did you come up with that? And he says, I don't know. They told me this was the right map. And so I just said, okay.
They told me.
Yeah, no, but literally he was in his 80s. And then, there was a big investigation where unfortunately he was sick and could not testify. But he released a statement that was the most legalese thing that the lawyers wrote. And the courts went, we have to follow the law, and this is good. And, but yeah, so New Jersey is a lot more Republican than it seems. So it's not surprising that, that Kane is doing okay. That doesn't surprise me. I mean,
is there state government a trifecta right now?
oh yeah, and it has been. I think for
probably until Chris Christie, right?
Yeah, Christie. And what happens is you tend to have Democratic legislatures. Sometimes the state Senate will get close to Republican.
Okay.
The House never. I don't think the House has been Republican in 40 years. But you get Republican governors simply because the Democrat governor is so bad. And the Democrat governors have been like, holy fuck, you're bad. I mean, like, and you get a Republican governor sometimes. And then what happens is that inevitably the Democrats then nominate somebody like you go, and are you fucking, that's just who the nominee is? You're like, the second time, I mean, Christie won against Corzine in a close race, and Corzine was just a disaster of a governor. And then they nominate a woman named Barbara Buono to run against Christie, and Buono was like this, she looked like Nancy Pelosi, but she was like kind of from I can't even call her like a super left winger. She was just this kind of bump on a log, safe seat Democrat that they put up. I mean, as opposed to somebody with a little game, but that happens. But New Jersey's a little more Republican than you would think. It's not a Republican state by any means. But I mean, what's also interesting in New York, Lawler and not Mondare, Michael Lawler.
I do have it on our list.
God, and because I think,
Michael Lawler defeated Patrick Maloney.
Right. And his seat got redistricted, and I think he got cut out of the district, and he had to move into the new district. But it's a super competitive race, and
in the 17th, New York.
Yeah.
So you think he's also a potential flip for Democrat?
No, I think he was a highly targeted. He was like one of the top 2 or 3 targets in the country, and it looks like he's doing well, and he's going to open it up a little bit.
Yeah, Mondare Jones.
Yeah. Who they've kind of tried to recreate a little bit.
So then what's your take? What's the over-under on whether or not the House flips control? I mean, you have Chavez DeRemer in, I guess, is that Oregon? You got a couple of California races. It seems to me that the vulnerable Republicans are more vulnerable than the vulnerable Democrats, in just my reading of it. But that doesn't mean it'll flip. They need to do 4 of them.
Yeah, and I think that's because, in 2020 and 22, you got these Republicans winning these, switchable seats because of Biden. And now that kind of has been balanced out, but they were always close. And the guys the candidates that are, I say guys, I'm generically, that are going to survive are the ones that have actually worked hard and built a brand outside of Republican or Democrat in the past 2 years. Like Lawler has. I mean, Lawler's been very, frankly, an exhausting schedule, an exhausting kind of thing. While other people were just kind of like, I'm the congressman now. And,
Right.
So
he's not a George Santos type.
Yeah. Who I miss. But yeah, I had him do a cameo for a friend of mine.
I read somewhere that somebody was going to offer him a TV show. Actually, I have no idea what's going to happen to that guy. I guess he's going to film it from prison.
I paid him to do a cameo for a friend of mine.
Was that you? Recently?
No. Last Christmas. Somewhere
on Twitter, he did a Twitter post that got reposted, and the person who reposted said, "I paid him for this post."
Yeah, it was hysterical. I forget what it was, but it was hysterical. My friend, it's this kind of hysterical thing. So a friend of mine have had this 30-year argument, 25-year argument about the best version of Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and it's kind of this punk thing that we always try to set each other up so that you kind of get the argument when you're least expecting it. A couple of years ago, he did a cameo that he sent me on Christmas Eve of Gilbert Gottfried calling me a motherfucker and you're sucking the dick of the ghost of Christmas past. I mean, it was shit that was so far across the line, but it was hysterical, And so this year, I did a sneak attack on him with a George Santos one as a member of Congress,
That's
as a member
awesome.
as a member of America's highest deliberative body. I think he said, or whatever it was. I wrote, but he was a good sport.
That's awesome. I would rather him be dressed as the what didn't he have a persona as like a drag queen kind of? I don't remember what her name was, but
yeah.
But then as the most prestigious member of the House of Representatives, but be dressed in that drag outfit like that would have been killer.
Yeah, no, I mean it was, but but I think that I can tell you from people that I'm doing some Republican congressional campaigns, but from my counterparts, we all think that the House is razor thin. And again, one of these things that like nobody fucking knows. It's a it's a 3-seat flip. And it's that close. It could go either way, and it wouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, it's interesting that you've got a Senate, a House, and president thing that could go either way, depending upon the way the wind's blowing on election day.
I agree. I'm going to insert this just really quickly, get your thoughts on it, but I have two other things. One is I agree with you, and to me, this is all indicative of who the candidates are in a way. And I think this makes 2026 and 2028 very interesting times. Again, regardless who wins, I think we're going to see what we've talked about before of what the parties do internally is going to be a big thing over the next 4 years. And that's going to play out in front of us in those races in 26 and 28.
Yeah.
So then I think you and I both agree that the Senate is going to be Republican, with the exception of potentially Nebraska, if this Ben Osborne can take it. What's your prediction for the next leader of the Senate? You think Cornyn or Thune, or who's going to take it? Are you allowed to say that? Does that put you out professionally out on a limb?
No, I think Thune.
Okay.
And simply because Cornyn is well liked among his peers, but I think that they see Thune as a much better public face.
Okay.
I mean, because he's a really handsome dude, number one. And no, he is.
Yeah, it helps.
I mean, he's really good looking, and he doesn't have an accent, or he doesn't have a disagreeable accent. And, he's got a reputation as not a bomb thrower, as kind of a fairly thoughtful guy. And I think that they like that idea of him as a thoughtful face.
So the only other thing I have is a comment from one of our shorts. Is there anything before I bring that up that you wanted to talk about today that we didn't get to? Okay. All right. So the short that I posted was about Kuntz shooting the reporter in Missouri, and the response came from Jay Rush, who wrote, "With a scope at 30 feet." He also went on to add, "Crybaby Kinzinger is an idiot." I don't really think we talked about Adam Kinzinger at all in that episode. I don't know that we've ever talked about him, so I don't really know what that means. But I think this guy's obviously a Republican, but with a scope at 30 feet. I looked it up after we talked. I don't even think they were 30 feet away from each other. Actually, I think it was within about 10 feet. The guy's lucky he didn't get hurt worse.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it, Chris, unless there's any last words that you want to say before election day.
As we say in Philly.
Good one. Well, then we will connect the day after election day. I'll see you then.
Sounds good.
There it is. Friends, Romans, countrymen. So you may know that. Yeah. Friends, Americans, countrymen we're in the last week. We're in the home stretch. Exciting news. We have launched our $100,000 free to enter general election contest. Check us out, fantasyelect.io. You will see big and bold the way to enter that contest. And it's very exciting. It's going to challenge you, and someone will potentially win $100,000. It's challenging, like I said, so it's not going to be a cakewalk. We're not just going to give you a K, even though I know each one of the candidates has promised you many, many things. Nobody's gone so far as to promise you 100K yet. Neither are we. We are, however, promising you the opportunity to win $100,000. Their taxes, I don't know, to be honest with you. You're probably only looking at about 50. Depends on who's elected, right? All right, that's it. Please leave your comments, and to Jay Rush and everyone else who has commented, thank you very much. Jay, by the way, let us know what you meant by the Adam Kinzinger thing. Did Adam Kinzinger, was he a crybaby about it? I don't actually know. Or were you comparing? Maybe you were comparing the reporter that got shot. Was, I don't know if he cried or not, but he cried like an Adam Kinzinger. Go vote early and often, as Chris said, and we will see you on November 6th, the day after Election Day. Have a good one. Bye.
Draft picks in the Senate, game on the floor. Campaign slogans echo final scores. Analysis deep as the trench warfare set. We break it down, no sweat, no net. Runs and touchdowns, where's your bet? Candidate playbooks, lines we set. Irreverent and free, we call it out. Competition fierce, ain't no doubt. And a Hail Mary pass. Legislation touchdowns, who's top class? Elections heated, brackets tight. Political fantasy, bring the night. Cynical plays and cynical ploys. Draft your politicians, trade your boys. Tackle the issues, fumble through lies. Only the sharp survive in our eyes. Campaign trails and field goals fade. Winners and losers.